This is SpaceX's most terrifying plan yet. Landing a 200-ton Starship on a floating platform in the middle of the ocean? Engineers are panicking because the math is brutal. They need a drone ship 4 times bigger than anything that exists today, weighing up to 9,000 tons just to handle the impact. But here's the problem that's got everyone spooked. One miscalculation and the entire Mars program could literally sink to the bottom of the ocean. Yet SpaceX has already filed the paperwork with the FAA. They're actually doing this. Let's dive right in. Here's what SpaceX doesn't want you to realize. For 5 years, everyone's been celebrating Falcon 9's drone ship landings. 361 successful catches out of 471 attempts on platforms like Just Read the Instructions and Of Course I Still Love You. Impressive, right? But here's the nightmare engineers are whispering about in dark corners. Falcon 9 weighs 25 tons empty. Starship, 200 tons. That's not just bigger. It's like comparing a motorcycle to a freight train hitting the same target. The forces involved would obliterate any current platform instantly. Think about this for a second. When Falcon 9 lands, it's like catching a falling car. When Starship lands, it's like catching a falling skyscraper, with 6 Raptor engines firing at 300 bar of pressure. The impact alone generates forces equivalent to a full-speed truck crash per landing leg. But wait, it gets worse. Those legendary drone ships everyone loves? They're toys compared to what Starship needs. Current platforms are 4,500 square meters. For Starship, engineers are looking at 9,600 to 18,000 square meters. That's nearly 4 football fields just for the landing deck. But size isn't the real problem. The physics are absolutely brutal. Current drone ships weigh around 3,000 tons and barely handle Falcon 9. A Starship platform needs to weigh between 5,000 and 9,000 tons just to absorb the landing shock without buckling like aluminum foil. Here's where it gets truly terrifying. The stabilization system alone needs 6 to 8 massive thrusters just to hold position. One thruster fails during the critical landing sequence. The entire platform drifts off course, sending a 200-ton rocket straight into the ocean at terminal velocity. And that's assuming everything else works perfectly. Which brings us to the problem that's keeping SpaceX engineers awake at night. Remember when Of Course I Still Love You had to remove its wings just to squeeze through the Panama Canal? Well, here's the twist that changes everything. A Starship-class drone ship might not fit through the canal at all. This isn't just an engineering problem. It's an existential threat to SpaceX's entire operation. How do you move an 18,000 square meter platform from the Atlantic to the Pacific? You can't fly it. You can't drive it. The Panama Canal is the only option, and if it doesn't fit, SpaceX needs separate fleets on each coast. With SpaceX planning 44 launches per year from Florida alone, plus 25 from Starbase and 76 from California, they can't afford logistical bottlenecks. One blocked canal route could cripple their entire launch cadence. But that's not even the worst part. Current Falcon 9 recovery takes 1 to 3 days. The drone ship travels at 18.5 kilometers per hour, positioned 200 to 600 kilometers offshore. Manageable for a 25-ton rocket. For Starship, the recovery could stretch to a week or more. Why? Because securing a 200-ton rocket in ocean conditions is exponentially more complex. Weather becomes critical. One storm system, and the entire recovery operation shuts down for days. Here's the killer detail. SpaceX needs rapid reusability to make Mars missions economically viable. Each Starship costs hundreds of millions to build. If every rocket is stuck on a drone ship for a week after landing, the entire business model collapses. Elon Musk's vision of 25 launches this year becomes impossible. The Mars timeline gets pushed back indefinitely. The dream dies in logistics hell. But we haven't even talked about the most terrifying part yet. SpaceX has been suspiciously quiet about Starship's landing legs. Why? Because the engineering requirements are absolutely horrifying. These aren't just legs, they're shock absorbers that must handle impact forces equivalent to a full-speed truck crash per leg. 6 legs total, each supporting 50 tons while absorbing impacts that would crush a building. But here's the twist that makes engineers panic. These legs need to work on drone ships, the moon, and Mars. Different gravity fields, different surface conditions, different atmospheric pressures. On the moon, 1/6 gravity. On Mars, 1/3 gravity. On a drone ship, full Earth gravity with ocean swells constantly rocking the platform. The engineering complexity is staggering. Wide footpads to prevent sinking, adjustable lengths for uneven terrain, locking mechanisms for ocean stability, active stabilization for moving platforms. One failure in any system, and a $500 million rocket becomes an artificial reef. And that assumes the legs even deploy correctly. What happens if one leg fails to extend? What happens if the locking mechanism jams? What happens if the shock absorbers fail under impact? Game over. But here's where this story takes a dramatic turn. This isn't some distant future concept. NASA's Artemis program is driving this timeline with an iron fist. In April 2024, astronauts Doug Hurley and Peggy Whitson tested the HLS design at SpaceX headquarters. The elevator system that will carry astronauts 50 meters down to the lunar surface? It's real. It's being built right now. SpaceX has already converted Ship 22's nose section into a crew module mock-up. Recent photos show hatch-equipped HLS modules in active development. The hardware timeline is locked in stone. NASA needs a working lunar lander by 2026, not 2027, not 2028, 2026. That means functional landing legs must be ready in less than 2 years. Following Falcon 9's development timeline, SpaceX first announced landing legs in 2011, revealed the design in 2013, and didn't perfect the system until 2016. 5 years total. For Starship, they started serious landing leg development in 2023. If they follow the same timeline, we won't see working systems until 2028. 2 years too late for NASA's deadline. The pressure is crushing, and the consequences of failure are unthinkable. Here's what's really terrifying engineers. With Falcon 9, a failed landing means losing one booster. Expensive, but manageable. The mission succeeds. The payload reaches orbit. SpaceX learns from the failure and improves. With Starship, a failed drone ship landing could mean losing the entire Mars program. Think about the math. Each Starship costs $500 million to build. Lose one in a drone ship accident, and you've just set back the timeline by months. Lose multiple ships, and the program becomes economically impossible. But it's not just about money. It's about public confidence. It's about NASA funding. It's about congressional support. It's about the future of human space exploration. One spectacular failure, broadcast live around the world, showing a 200-ton rocket exploding on impact with a drone ship? That's not just a setback. That's a program killer. And here's the most terrifying part. SpaceX knows all these risks exist. They've run the calculations. They've modeled the failures. They've seen the potential for catastrophic loss, and they're moving forward anyway. Why would SpaceX take such insane risks? Here's the truth they don't want you to know. They don't have a choice. Mechazilla towers are perfect for controlled environments. But what happens when a tower needs maintenance? What happens during severe weather? What happens when you need to land somewhere without infrastructure? Mars doesn't have Mechazilla towers. The moon doesn't have catching arms. Drone ship technology isn't Plan B. It's the only path to becoming a truly multiplanetary species. But here's the secret that changes everything. Those FAA documents SpaceX filed, they weren't filed because SpaceX wants to land on drone ships. They were filed because SpaceX absolutely must master this technology or abandon the Mars dream entirely. The physics of space exploration demand it. The economics of Mars missions require it. The survival of human civilization as a multiplanetary species depends on it. Right now, SpaceX is still perfecting re-entry with flights like the recent Flight 7, where Ship 33 exploded due to a propellant leak. They're upgrading to Block 2 designs. They're preparing for tower catches. But behind the scenes, they're already working frantically on drone ship solutions. The timeline is brutal. Following Falcon 9's development pattern, landing legs won't be ready until 2026. The first Starship drone ship could be operational by 2027. That's assuming everything goes perfectly. No delays, no catastrophic failures, no engineering setbacks. But here's what's really keeping engineers awake at night. What if they can't solve these problems? What if the physics prove impossible? What if the risks are too great? Then humanity's best shot at becoming a multiplanetary species dies with them. Because if SpaceX can't figure out how to safely land a 200-ton rocket on a floating platform in the middle of the ocean, no one else will even try. The future of human civilization might literally depend on solving an engineering problem that most experts consider impossible. And that's a responsibility no company should have to bear alone. But SpaceX doesn't have the luxury of failure. Because if they can't make this work, humanity might never make it to Mars. And that's a future none of us can afford to accept. So here we are. SpaceX is betting everything on solving an impossible engineering problem that could either make humanity multiplanetary or sink the entire Mars dream to the bottom of the ocean. The scariest part? They're probably going to pull it off. Because that's what SpaceX does. They turn the impossible into routine. Remember when landing a rocket was just science fiction? Now Falcon 9 does it twice a week, but this time the stakes are different. This isn't just about reusability or cost savings. This is about the survival of our species. And honestly, that's exactly the kind of pressure SpaceX thrives under. What do you think? Will SpaceX crack the code on landing starships at sea? Or are we watching them attempt something that's fundamentally impossible? Drop your thoughts below, and if you want to see how this story unfolds, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next when humanity takes its next giant leap toward becoming a spacefaring civilization. NASA just got embarrassed. Big time. SpaceX launches rockets for $62 million. NASA? $4 billion for the same job. That's not a typo. That's your tax money disappearing into thin air. Here's the brutal truth. SpaceX is making $15.5 billion this year, while NASA's budget shrinks to $18.8 billion. A private company is about to out-earn America's space agency. But here's what's really shocking. NASA has launched their new rocket once in 2 years. SpaceX ? Every other day. So where exactly are those billions going? The answer will make you furious. Let's dive right in. Here's where it gets absolutely insane. SpaceX's revenue this year, $15.5 billion. That's up from $13 to $14 billion last year. But here's the kicker. $11.8 billion of that comes from just one thing, Starlink satellites. Think about that for a second. A company that didn't even exist 23 years ago is now making more money than NASA's entire budget. How is that even possible? Let's rewind to 2002. SpaceX was literally just carpet and dreams. No rockets, no satellites, no billion-dollar contracts. Just Elon Musk with a crazy idea and a lot of money to burn. Their first rocket? The Falcon 1. And guess what? It failed. 3 times. By 2008, SpaceX was on life support. One more failure and they were done. Game over. But then something incredible happened. They nailed it on the 4th try. That single launch in September 2008 saved the company. But here's what's really wild. NASA actually helped save SpaceX. They gave them a $1.6 billion contract right when they needed it most. NASA basically created their own competition. Fast forward to today, and SpaceX has 8,000 satellites orbiting Earth. 8,000! That's more satellites than some countries have ever launched combined. But here's where it gets genius. Every Starlink satellite is basically a cash machine in space. Monthly subscriptions from millions of users worldwide, government contracts, hardware sales. It's a recurring revenue goldmine. While NASA is still asking Congress for money every year, SpaceX is making money every single day. Now let's talk about that jaw-dropping number from earlier. NASA's Space Launch System, their new rocket, costs $4 billion per launch. SpaceX's Falcon 9, $62 million. That's not a typo. That's not an exaggeration. That's your tax dollars at work. But wait, it gets worse. A 2022 study revealed something that should make every taxpayer furious. SpaceX isn't just 10 times cheaper than NASA. They have 30 times fewer cost overruns. Think about what that means. NASA doesn't just cost more. They can't even estimate their own costs correctly. Here's where NASA's problems become crystal clear. Since 2006, SpaceX has launched 500 times. That's one launch every 14 days for nearly 2 decades. NASA's brand new SLS rocket, one launch in 2 years. One. In 2024 alone, SpaceX completed 134 launches. NASA? Still trying to get their second SLS launch off the ground. But here's the real shocker. SpaceX is aiming for 170 launches this year.